Good job, Dave.
Apparently, we're getting a little feedback there. Hello and welcome, everybody, into another edition of the Sun Solar Panel. I'm Greg Esposito. I don't know what is going on. Everybody, there we go. Let's try it again. Hello and welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Sun Solar Panel. I am Greg Esposito. Glad to have you with us, and thank you for watching live on YouTube, listening on the podcast. Ahoy hoy to everybody. Joining us today is Dave King, as always. Dave, how are you?
Are we ready? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can you not hear me?
Now I can. Jesus. Really need some producer help.
I don't know what I think Dave's computer's cracked. So for a third time, let me start this. Hello and welcome everybody into the Sun Solar Panel. I am your host, Greg Esposito. We appreciate you watching live on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Ahoy hoy. Glad to be joined, as always, by the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, the grandfather, Dave King. How are you, Dave?
Oh, hello. How's it going?
And very excited to have another special guest host in our rolling cavalcade of characters that we're bringing in. He's a former Arizona Rattlers play-by-play man, used to work for Sports 360 AZ. He is a Nick Cage aficionado and a lifelong Suns fan. He is Jared Cohen. Jared, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here. Fan of the show. And I'm just glad to be able to be in the same presence of you both.
Oh,
to
wow.
talk little Suns.
Don't make us feel too good about ourselves.
We never do, especially when we have whatever the heck just happened at the beginning of the show. Well, we're always humbled here on the Sun Solar Panel. But glad.
No, you've used this excuse before. You've got all your stuff set up for work, streaming, and stuff like that. And then on the weekends, we got to switch everything up. And sometimes you only switch a few of the things and not all of them. That was my problem.
I blame the guest. I'm sure it was Jared had some weird setting that wasn't correct.
I like to keep you on your toes. I have to make things interesting for you. So I won't tell you what I did, but I did.
The rolling cavalcade of characters, you had a perfect opportunity to use the brothel on two wheels.
Yes, hey, and that is a Marcin Gortat reference, and he may make an appearance later in the show. Dave, why don't you tell everybody what's coming up on today's episode after you finish drinking whatever alcoholic beverage that is?
Yeah, we'll call it coffee. Let's see. We are going to finally actually go into the should we or should we not keep Kelly Oubre or trade Kelly Oubre. What really should be done with that man with the flaming golden locks and who's working out at the Suns arena this offseason. We're going to talk about that insane schedule that they're talking about for the offseason NBA to get us already playing regular season games again by Christmas. We're going to talk about Devin Booker's 2K rating. Amar'e joining Nash's staff with the Nets. Then you guys are going to have a little Nick Cage spectrum, and then Espo's big board of the week. And finally, the flaming baller bag, or ball sack, as we like to call it affectionately.
We'll reach in there deep today and pull out something fun for us to discuss. Hey, before
does Jared know who flaming ballers are?
Jared, flaming ballers are the people who have joined on YouTube or have joined via our podcast feed. You can do that. Click the join button on the YouTube page. Click the link in the description to become a supporter of the show, and you will also be known as a flaming baller. There are, I think it's $1, $5, and $10 options that you can join. We appreciate it. We also appreciate when you hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube or Facebook if you're watching live. That helps with whatever the hell those algorithms are that we all have to deal with to get views on these lovely platforms. Guys, before we jump into the topics, I wanted to bring up one thing this week that became debate worthy on Twitter. It's my use of Ahoy Hoy at the beginning of the show. We did a poll whether we should get rid of it or we should keep it. And it was the closest vote I have ever seen in my life. It was 48.3 to 49.7 in favor of keeping Ahoy Hoy. So we will likely I will likely keep that. But do either of you where do you guys stand on the use of that as a catchphrase at the beginning of the show?
Does it stem from anything, like something in your past? Does it resonate with you in some regard that it's important to you? Because that might be key in my vote here. It's a voting season where we have to pay a lot of attention and a lot of detail to these types of things. So
yes, it is my love of nautical themed jokes. No, it actually comes from The Simpsons. It's a line from Montgomery Burns on The Simpsons. So
I thought it came from Gilligan's Island.
No, it's a line. That is how
I always want you to be
Burns,
wearing the skipper hat when you say it.
It's how Mr. Burns used to answer in one episode, answered the phone when he learned how to be self-sufficient in an episode, and it's always just stuck with me. And I've even sarcastically answered the phone like that from time to time. So it's here to stay. So I think
I vote yes.
All right,
vote yes.
Good.
Keep it.
I don't care. I was going to keep it regardless of what you two or the people on Twitter said. But yeah,
I figured
we bring it up. So let's get into it. Another thing that we want to know, should it stay or should it go, is Kelly Oubre Jr. We've danced around this topic on the show for a very long time, and now it's time to get into it. Dave had a tweet, and Dave, you can get into your point. I'm not going to steal your thunder, as much fun as that is, but Dave had a tweet Dave had a tweet earlier this week that just made it clear it's time to talk about this. So Dave, I'm going to start with you. Jared, we will get to you, I promise. But I will let Dave start on this topic. Should Kelly Oubre stay or should he go now, Dave?
All right. So it depends on which stay you're talking about. Do you mean stay for this coming season? Here's the deal. For any one Suns fan out there who doesn't quite know the Kelly Oubre situation, what we've got here is we have a starting caliber small forward who makes $14 million this coming season, but he is a free agent at the end of the season when more than half the league has more than $20 million to spend, assuming the salary cap goes where it's supposed to go by next year, which there's no guarantee of. But assuming that, he can get a lot of cash next summer. So do you trade him now and move forward, or do you let him go next summer and replace him with somebody else? Because the Suns will have that same cash next summer. That's really the question that I have in my mind. I don't personally need to plan for multiple years out. I would have this discussion on just being this coming season. So that's my starter point. My starting point is, are we talking about one season or are we talking about multiple seasons for Kelly Oubre Jr.? And Jared, what do you think?
Well, I think now, are we talking about should we trade him and have him for one more year?
Yeah, because he's under contract. So he's under contract for this coming season. So you're either going to trade him or you're going to keep him.
Okay, so if that's the case, I'm leaning personally, and much as it pains me to say this, because a lot of the times we look at Monty Williams as the person who's been brought in as the guy that kind of changed the culture and changed the look. But I go back to Kelly Oubre being traded to the Suns and how all the things that came from that, because he was the first player I can remember in a long time that actually made it fun and kind of cool to wear a Suns uniform again. And the way he kind of galvanized the fan base and kind of made everyone excited. It made it look like they were having fun on the bench for the first time, maybe since, I don't know, Sean Marion was on the team. It was something that was fun to watch, and it really resonated with me and I think a lot of other Suns fans out there. So prefacing with that, I think now should be the time to trade him, because I don't know if I see him as a long-term piece if we're looking at it the way you are. If he's someone where you either keep him for just this year, or if you don't trade him, you're looking long-term. I look at a guy who may not be the best piece to have in that position and that role past next year with some of the guys they have in the pipeline. And I also look at it as this is your best trading asset that you have this offseason, and the best teams in the NBA year in and year out, offseason and offseason out, always find a way to utilize their best tradable assets and maximize that. And if this is going to be an offseason where they make the jump into the playoffs, it might be the time to strike and make a move. But if I've learned anything from Dave King, if that move is if
don't
that
learn
move,
anything from Dave King.
I did learn one thing from you. And if that move is to trade up in this year's draft, then I'm out. Like I'd rather have Kelly Oubre here for the next 3 to 5 years if it means trading up in this draft, personally, based on what I've learned from you and the college basketball I consumed this year. So that's kind of where I'm at the Kelly Oubre situation.
Look, I have made no secret about my feelings when it comes to Kelly Oubre and whether he should be on this roster or not. It is the smart move to make because you are likely going to trade him.
Okay.
Dave apparently has not listened to any episode in the last.
No, you have to actually say it on this one. You can't dance around it.
Trade Kelly Oubre, all right, is the stance, because you're not going to fiscally be able to keep him. He's not going to make sense if the plan is to keep Mikal, is to keep DeAndre, is to keep Devin, and it's to try to add another piece or two to this roster to make you an actual contender. Kelly Oubre's money does not make sense in this going forward. So you're likely going to lose him as a free agent. So you have to maximize your assets. That's how you win a championship, is by making the smart trades, trading a guy when you can get value for him, not letting guys walk without getting something back. And I think there's a market for Kelly out there this offseason, especially teams may not want to get involved in this free agency pool because it's very shallow, but they may want to add talent to their roster. I mean, everybody does. Everybody wants to try to improve. So you may be able to get a little bit more value for Kelly Oubre, since we're going to have a free agency.
Other teams are trying to improve. How can you get more value for Kelly than what he is?
Well, I'm simply saying, because there is not a lot of options out there in free agency that are going to help teams improve their roster, especially teams that were not very good, that did not have success last year, that may be desperate to try to get a little bit better with some proven talent. You may be able to get more out of them. There may be a 3-team deal that you can work where somebody's willing to give up a higher draft pick in this draft that somebody's interested in, and you can get part of that. There's all sorts of options that James Jones can get involved in here.
So Jared learns from me, but Espo does not. You did not trade up in this damn draft.
I'm not saying we want
Kelly Oubre to do that.
No, I'm not saying the Suns. Listen, I'm not saying the Suns want a higher draft pick. I'm saying you can become part of a deal for a team that wants to get higher in this draft. And there are, if you look at reports, and you become that third team that trades a piece and gets something of value that's proven talent back, where the other team wants the draft pick out of the deal and Kelly goes somewhere. But really, to me, the reason I think that I'm most comfortable with dealing Kelly Oubre at this point is look at what happened in the bubble. Kelly Oubre did not play, right? And the ball movement was the best we saw out of this team the entire year. It was the best we saw a Monty Williams offense run. It was the best we saw this team play as a unit. Right?
And also the best they played defense from a rotation standpoint.
And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that had a lot to do with Kelly Oubre tends to be a guy on offense that the ball stops with. And without him there, the offense was more free-flowing. And defensively,
I just struggle with the bubble thing, though. Like, as much as the bubble was an absolute blast and it was the most fun I'd had watching basketball in at least a decade, and the team was, like you said, they were firing on all cylinders, and they played some excellent basketball. They also played teams that sat people, and they also played teams that we just caught them on the right day. But I look at the bubble, and I'm like, if we're talking about 8 games in an NBA season, then aren't we also talking about, if we take 8 games from last year, paying Aaron Baines a max contract right now? Like I really struggle with making vast decisions about our roster.
You could also
and
take
about
that 8-game losing streak in December and trade everybody on the team.
exactly.
If you're going to only
or,
focus on an 8-game streak. Look, that's
yeah.
what and Jared, you guys are saying this. The Suns passing was never better. Well, outside the bubble with Kelly Oubre, they led the league in assists. And this is with Kelly Oubre in the lineup. Outside the bubble with Kelly Oubre in the lineup, with that 5-man lineup with Mikal starting next to Kelly Oubre, with Ayton and Rubio and Booker, they had the best net rating in the entire league at a plus 20.2. The problem with us not seeing that enough was because of Ayton's suspension and because Kelly Oubre's injury right as Ayton was getting back and and in the flow. It might have even gotten better, that net rating. And so people say it never looked better than the bubble. Well, the overall 8-game winning streak made everything look great in the bubble, and it was good in the bubble. But the lineup with Cameron Johnson was not quite as good as the lineup with Kelly Oubre around Mikal and Devin Booker and Ricky Rubio and DeAndre Ayton. Why would you give up a great lineup just to swap out your dude because you're worried he might not re-sign in a year or might want too much money in a year? How about getting the dude? Like, who are you going to trade for, by the way? You're probably going to trade for a dude who is starting caliber, who can switch on to just about any defender in a lineup so you don't have to find good matchups for him, who can drive and score on his own, who can catch and shoot. Got to be nice to have a 48% catch and shoot 3-point shooter in clutch, in that spot. If you're going to trade Kelly, you'd like him to be a fan favorite. You'd like him to be somebody who you don't, in receiving him in trade, you don't think about, is he here for 2 or 3 years? No, you're thinking about, is he here for this next year? And then we'll see if he's worth keeping. You just described Kelly Oubre. You just described Kelly Oubre.
And
this
Fred
year,
Van Fleet. You described Fred Van Fleet.
Yeah, but the Suns, look, you can't, first of all, you can't trade Oubre for Van Vliet because Van Vliet's going to be a free agent. So what do? You just bring them, have them both. Why don't we do both? Because they have the money. Wait.
Can you afford it?
Yes. Well, it depends on what Fred will take. But the Suns have almost $20 million in cap space to spend while keeping Kelly and Fred VanVleet. And people really want Jeremy Grant. But you know what? Compare Jeremy Grant to Kelly Oubre, and Kelly Oubre actually looks like the better player. We have recency bias with watching Jeremy Grant play functional defense against some of the better players for Denver, because Denver doesn't have any defenders in their lineup outside of Jeremy Grant because their defenders were hurt for the most part. But so he looked really good, and he is a good complementary player, but he's not better than Kelly, and you don't use his space for Kelly. You want somebody who's going to be really effective on this team when they're playing well. He was in the Suns' best lineup all season. He was one of the best lineups in the entire league. He was second on the team in points per game, second on the team in rebounds per game, third on the team in steals per game, second on the team in blocks per game, second on the league in free throw attempts per game, second on the team, and second on the team in 3-point attempts per game. And he played the second most minutes. You're not going to find a better player for $14 million out there. So why are we even talking about this?
Look, it's simple because it's about fit. It's about the long term. You've got to look at all this and you got to think about, what are we building here? What is the plan?
David, wait,
here?
I've got to respond to David Bailey. He's been going off in the chat right now saying that keeping Kelly puts Mikal on the bench. Actually, Kelly starts at power forward in their best lineup, and Mikal starts at small forward. They both start. It's Cam Johnson who's coming off the bench.
And that lineup doesn't beat the Lakers, though.
No.
I mean, I love that lineup, and that would be so much fun against a Denver team, maybe against Portland. But, you go up against the defending champs, and that lineup, I think, gets beat 4 times a season. Maybe you sneak one out if we are playing Kelly at the 4 and Mikal at the 3.
I know the league is doing that, where it's a copycat league. Whoever won the last championship, everybody wants to match, and it's so fun because for the last 5 years, everyone's wanted to go the small way because the Warriors won finals without two bigs. Now all of a sudden everyone has to have two bigs. Look, you can have a second big. You don't need to sacrifice Kelly to have that second big who can play next to Ayton. You just need to keep Kelly. Don't give away good players when you want to be a good team.
You just damn contradicted yourself. If you bring in a guy that play next to a big to play next to DeAndre Ayton, then you're not starting Kelly at power forward, and you've created a bigger problem because now you've both benched Cam Johnson and Kelly Oubre or
Why
Mikal.
does everyone think it's only a 5-man roster?
Well, but if you're
it's not a 5-man roster, it's a 15-man roster, and every night 11 guys play.
I get it, but look, I do not see how long term it makes sense to not.
I'm not playing long term anymore.
But
We're not on a timeline anymore.
Great.
We're on a freaking this season.
Yeah, and if you bring back Kelly Oubre and you don't do much, you just nibble around the fringes, you know what you got? A 38-40 win team who doesn't make the playoffs.
You don't know that's all they're going to win this next year.
Okay.
It's not Kelly's fault they won. They were on a 38 win pace. It's DeAndre Ayton's fault they were on a 38 win pace because he didn't play half the season.
So if DeAndre Ayton plays those extra 25 games, how many more wins do you think they get? Do you really
45.
think? You really think okay? And 45 in this Western Conference doesn't make the playoffs.
This coming year, they can win more. Plus, there's a play-in tournament. Okay, we'll talk about this in the next segment. But there's going to be another play-in tournament. So even if the Suns are in 9th place or 10th place or whatever it is, they're still going to get a chance to get in.
I just, I'd feel a little bit better if I believed that Kelly Oubre maybe would be all right coming off the bench as well, because
I don't think he has to come off the bench.
So if you're going to try,
I still want to sign Christian Wood.
Okay, so if you sign Christian Wood and you spend money on him, he's coming off the bench.
Yes.
I just don't.
He still plays 30 minutes a game. So does Kelly. So does Mikal. Cam plays 25, 28. You have an 8-man rotation. It's not a 5-man roster.
I know it's not a 5-man roster, but I just don't see. I just don't see how that planning. I just don't see how the whole thing plays out. But this is the point. This is the argument, because I think this is about how Suns fans are split too. I think there's two distinct groups.
There are two distinct groups.
Just like this, and I get it. And
can we not live in a world where everybody hates each other?
I don't hate Dave.
Everywhere?
I don't hate you. I don't hate anybody that holds the opinion. Well, maybe I hate Dave, but I don't hold that against anybody else that holds the opinion that you should keep Kelly. I get it, but I don't see long term how it makes sense. Okay, maybe you're saying, okay, we'll gain cap space next year to go play in. Well, no, but I'm saying if you're not planning, if the plan isn't to keep Kelly, if it's just a 1 year, run it back next year, and then in all likelihood we just gain Oubre's cap space in 2021.
If a team was forced to make a decision 1 year that they couldn't change their mind on a year later, 2 years later, this would be the Suns would be even worse than they already are. A year ago, DeAndre Ayton was a turnstile on defense, and you didn't necessarily want him to be a defensive anchor. A year later, now you can consider him being a defensive anchor, and you can consider other guys being out there that he could cover for. So things do change every single offseason and every single year that players play. Saul Bookman's in the chat saying Dave's plan, everyone gets 40 minutes per game. Has anyone ever heard of Mike D'Antoni? Everyone played 30, 35 minutes a game. There were 7 of them, 8 of them.
Yeah.
And everybody can get the minutes. Everyone can eat. I don't want Kelly Oubre I don't want Elie Okobo getting all these backup minutes just because you're only supposed to give 10 guys good minutes every game.
Mike D'Antoni almost killed the guys on that roster. Do you remember how bad
more playoffs than the Suns have?
Yeah, do you remember how bad an 8-man rotation turned out to be?
All right, we need to let Jared talk. Sorry, Jared.
I was gonna say I'm kind of like enjoying putting my arms.
No, please talk.
Watching you guys do your thing. I mean, Dave, I'm with you, but and I totally get what you're saying, and I totally get the point of. Why would we trade away a player that's a good asset? We've been trading away good players for years, and we have something good going. I just think that there's some great pieces out there. Like there's some great opportunities out there. There's some really intriguing names to go with players that we currently have. Like I'm a big Lauri Markkanen fan. Like remember when there was all those rumors about him and the Bulls wanted to get rid of him? Like that. That's a player that stands out to me that you put him next to Ayton with the way Ayton, to your point, made strides defensively, and you have an inside outside option in your front court. If there's a sign and trade or a way to open up space to ensure that you get Fred VanVleet, who I think would be a phenomenal option, both as a future point guard for this team and playing with Rubio. Like, do you recall how great Javon Carter and Cam Payne played together on the same court in the bubble? Like, imagine if that's Ricky Rubio and Fred VanVleet in the same offense, in the same rotation. There are guys out there that can be ripe for the taking if the Suns had the flexibility to do so. And to have that flexibility, it may take having to unload Kelly. And while I get what you're saying about the type of player he is, the rankings that he had within the roster, but based on stats and volume and efficiency and from a chemistry standpoint, it'll be really hard to lose a guy like that. But I mean, even the thought of putting a Serge Ibaka next to DeAndre Ayton with the way he can defend and also shoot and play the inside-outside game. And I know you guys like Christian Wood a lot. There are just some names out there that you could almost ensure that you get as a result of making this trade that I think could be phenomenal pieces for the team, not just this coming year, but for a few years to come. So that's where I struggle. That's why I kind of tend to lean trading Kelly. But if you're just trading up in the draft, or you're getting a player that's kind of relatively equal in terms of value to a team, but maybe plays a different position, I'm with you. I'm out. It has to be the right move. And I would rather keep him for one last season and let him walk than do something that's kind of a lateral move, or a let's throw something at the board and hope it sticks with the draft pick again.
Let me make this clear. I'm not saying they should TJ Warren Kelly Oubre here. This is not get cash considerations and call it a day. Like, you only make the move if it strategically makes you better.
Favorite tweet ever, and that's a low bar. That's a really low bar. But my favorite tweet ever of yours was hash considerations. If the Suns opened up their own medical marijuana joint.
Well, can you give a little context? I went down that road because Sean Kemp opened one in Seattle, and we did basically. If the Suns had a dispensary, what would it be called? So hash consideration.
Which was a fun conversation. That was fun. I like that.
All right. I think we've made it very clear that we are not going to settle. Yeah. We're not going to settle the Kelly Oubre debate.
It's settled.
This is very much like some of these political debates. We're just going to keep shouting, and I'm the only one that can mute anybody, and I don't feel.
And you guys are the ones going, we have a very good plan coming. We haven't outlined exactly what that plan is, but we have a very good one coming to replace the one that's already there.
It's exactly how I feel in this debate.
We have a beautiful Kelly Oubre plan, and at some point I'll show you what it is, but not right now. Let's move on. We've got big other news coming up in the NBA that broke yesterday. Actually, it was kind of a godsend, because when you're doing a show in the middle of the off season, you go, what the hell are we going to talk about? And then Shams Charania said, this is what you're going to talk about, when he broke the news that the NBA is looking at a 72 game season that would start December 22nd, and that there may not be an all-star game, and that season would include a play-in tournament. All right, that is the framework of what the NBA and the NBA Players Association is going to negotiate on. Question, and we'll let Jared start first this time, and actually talk maybe. What do you think of this plan, and does a truncated free agency period potentially benefit the Phoenix Suns?
I think to answer the first part, I think it's great news for a team like the Suns, and maybe teams that didn't play as far into the bubble, because I mean, back when I was in my past life, when I was in the media world, you always met with the players, both from professionally down through high school, on their off-season workouts and their ramp-up periods and their resting. And for teams like the Lakers and the rest of the teams that were in the final few weeks of the bubble, it's going to be tough to scale down and then ramp back up in 2 months. So what does that mean? They're probably going to have to rest some people early in the season, or at least scale it back a little bit, and that could be the benefit of a team like the Suns or other teams that have had plenty of time off to rest and ramp up for an upcoming season. The NBA really needs to make a decision here, though, because these players, they're like well-oiled machines, and they need to know when they're starting so that they can get regimented and on the same page. So that aside, I think it benefits moving quicker for a team like the Suns, because they've had their sights on this offseason long before COVID was a thing, long before the bubble was a thing, and long before we knew what the starting date was going to be. They had to have a plan because of the players that were going to be leaving the roster this season, and all the other things that we've also just already discussed in terms of whether they keep Kelly Oubre or not. So I hope, you never know when it comes to the Suns, but I would think that there's a plan of execution. And with a team that has, less time to do it, they might be able to put the pedal to the metal and be able to try to execute this quickly and swiftly and be one of the teams to have some of the first dominoes to fall, as opposed to being the teams that have to step back and wait for the big pieces to fall, because those big max contracts aren't a part of this free agent pool this year. So I think it benefits them for a few different reasons. And it benefits them from gameplay next year because, a team like the Lakers and the Clippers, who are both in their division, played pretty far into the playoffs, and they might need to scale it back a little bit at the start of the season while they're still training their bodies and still healing from the bubble.
So for those who don't follow the news, let me just give a quick summary of what news did break before we give too many more opinions about it. We always knew that, well, we've known for the past month or two that the draft is going to happen on November 18th. The reason that's going to take a full month after the end of the season is the bookkeepers, not bookmakers, but bookkeepers have to figure out what the hell just happened in that season. How much money did the owners lose and all that financially? And then what's the cap going to be for next year? But once that November 18th hits, now they've decided that they're just going to go balls out into the next year. So November 18th is your draft. And then within a week there, everybody wants to take the weekend off for Thanksgiving. But then as soon as Thanksgiving is over, we're going to have free agency and we're going to have trade season. So that's going to be by December 1. It could be even a few days prior to that. Training camps are going to open in early December. Training camps for next season. Then you're going to have some preseason scrimmages, kind of like they had the scrimmage games in the bubble. And then you're going to have regular season games starting as early as December 22nd. So we are talking a lot of nothing for a month or two, and then all of a sudden, bam, and we're playing basketball. They're going to try to get into a 72-game season. Why does a 70-plus game season matter? TV contracts. So there's two main sources of revenue in the NBA. 60% of the money, 60% of the money comes from TV deals, and 40% of the money comes from gate receipts. In a perfect world, and in the world we lived in until 6 months ago, the owners got both, and then they split 51% to the owners, 49% to all the players. Let's not talk about scale here. That's just the way it was, and that was as good as it had ever gotten. 51% to the 31 owners, 49% to the 450 players. But the revenue is, again, 60% TV contracts, 40% gate receipts. You're not going to be able to get both in an NBA season. So you've got to get the best you can, and they've got to get the TV money first. And the TV money, most of those deals require a 70-game season, 70-game season. So to do that, you've got to play the games. And to do that and not compete with the Olympics that are definitely coming next August, you've got to start early. And that's why the owners are going to start at Christmas.
Well, I think your point too about TV is a good one on why you would want to start on the 22nd as well, because that traditionally that Christmas Day is a huge TV day for the NBA. So you make sure you're not leaving your television partners with a gap on a day that usually is a big one for them. I think it is very interesting to look at this and try to figure out how you jam free agency in before you'd have to get to a training camp if the season's starting on the 22nd. I think the only way you can do this is if you start free agency before the draft, because you're not going to jam free agency into a week before you got to report to training camp. That is just untenable for anybody that's a free agent right now, because then they're going to have to move to a new market, potentially try to figure that out. They're going to try to have to practice. I think they're going to have to start free agency that week before the draft. I think it's the only way you're going to make it work if the 22nd of December is when you're starting the season. And I'm actually fine with that. I don't think it impacts a huge amount. I think it actually makes the draft more interesting, because teams will then have filled holes in free agency, and it changes the way you draft. I would be very intrigued to see how that plays out. For the Suns, I think any kind of truncated free agency is beneficial to them, because it means, guys, you're going to go, here's our first and best offer. This is the money that we can give you, and it's going to be expedited. People are going to make decisions quicker, and I think that bodes well for the team with probably like we talked about last week, with one of the most rooms in their cap, and then one of the most intriguing options from a roster standpoint with money. Like you got a lot of bad teams with money. The Suns are one of the few that look like they're up and coming. So you may get a guy that makes a decision much quicker, and maybe even takes a little less, simply because there's not time to play the games. You're not sitting here and sitting on an offer for a week because you're trying to play it against other teams. This is going to be, pick your poison right now. There's not a lot of opportunity to tap dance around.
As long as the player that they're not really excited and aggressive to go after right at the very beginning of free agency is Trevor Ariza, as long as it's not that person that they can be really excited about to jump on right when free agency opens, then
that could be a big segment for the show. Is who are this year's Trevor Arizas that the Suns need to avoid desperately?
That's a great idea. Absolutely. But and one of the guys that they should have gotten during the who's not a Trevor Ariza is Fred VanVleet, and he's there. So I don't know. Hopefully he was there back then too. So hopefully they're being aggressive. I think of all off seasons for them to be aggressive and maybe work in their favor could be this one based on their situation. But hopefully it's not a Trevor Ariza type move.
Look, I'm afraid Christian Wood is the Trevor Ariza of this period. Somebody's gonna back up the Brinks truck, and then they're gonna realize, oh, there's a reason this guy has been on so many teams, and maybe he was a good stat, a bad team guy. That is my biggest fear.
Hey, maybe he could be Chauncey Billups. Chauncey Billups was on like 4 different teams until he suddenly became a championship player.
But yeah, Chauncey Billups was also a guy that was drafted high in a draft, and talent was seen there. Christian Wood wasn't that guy. I'm not saying that
Are you saying he's Milli Vanilli? Is that
yes,
one-hit wonder?
He's lip syncing. He was lip syncing in Detroit, and now and he won a fefew Grammys, and we've all found it out now that he's going to get the bag. No, I don't know. I'm just saying that's my fear going into this, especially because a truncated timetable, you may wind up bidding against yourself, and somebody may go Christian Wood, $17 million right out the gates, just because they're like, oh, we need to make that splash.
Sold.
And like that guy's going to jump at that about as fast as you can. And I've heard he may be a unique individual. I was talking to some sources, and
sure, of course,
maybe a bit of a head case.
Hey, I loved it. People have talked about Hassan Whiteside coming back out of nowhere too, right? So actually, Christian Wood makes me think of that kind of guy, Hassan Whiteside. And I heard, I can't remember who talked about it, but he's a former front office person who talked about Hassan Whiteside when he first came into the league. He was a different dude, and in the respect that he didn't even he didn't know how to live life as an individual outside of his parents' home. And so that's one of the reasons Hassan Whiteside washed out of the league. And it took him about 4 years or so to figure things out enough to be able to function and then use his talent. And since then, he became a max player with Miami, and now he's got traded to Detroit because they overpaid him when they gave him max money, and now he's going to be bandied about by somebody slightly better than Timofey Mozgov. So it could be that Christian Wood is like that because of the unique individual part that's why you wash out, even if you have great talent. But he also, Christian Wood, might be straightening everything out and becoming, the next Hassan Whiteside.
Look, I got to bring up one of the comments in the chat. One of our flaming ballers, Steve Holler, says, Espo full of fears. Yeah, have you been a Suns fan for any time?
I was just
the last 10 years just instills fear in you when it comes to making decisions. And the history of the team always having something bad happen.
How about Amin El Hassan? He was on the jump the other day, and actually he's obviously got a bone to pick with the Suns organization. He has a good right to have that bone to pick. But man, he went on the jump the other day, and they were asking, what's your hot take for next season? His hot take was the Suns come out playing like crap and Devin Booker demands a trade by midseason. It's like, come on, man. That's talking about playing on fears.
That's not even a lukewarm take. That's just that's what everybody expects take. Like,
well, that's what the rest of the panel said. They're like, that's not so hot, dude.
Yeah, that's what everyone comes to expect, and I just that's more someone wanting to go off and wanting to be controversial or has a bone to pick, like
actually,
you said.
My hot take is that year 2.5 of Monty is going to be freaking awesome. That's my hot take because no one else is going to actually believe it.
Look, that was a mean going to the hibachi grill before it's even on and trying to claim it's hot.
We need to respell his name, Amean. Amin.
Yeah, well, that's always how his name should have been spelled. By the way, David Bailey in the chat says Espo needs some of the Suns cannabis. So I don't know. I think cash considerations might actually make me more nervous than anything else. So let's get moving on.
Blaze Megatron in the chat said, geez, 7 seconds of memory.
Well, of course, a guy that has dubbed himself Blaze would have some jokes in terms of that. No surprise there. But let's another thing that could be considered a hot take here is Devin Booker's 2K rating. They released it earlier this week for the next gen consoles for you older kids like Dave out there. The next gen consoles are the new Xbox, the new PS5 that's coming out. So they released ratings for that, and our graphics department had a little fun with this. I'll just put the rating up there and the image. Devin Booker was an 88, and basically, I think Devin's right here, going the double barrel here. If the graphics department
like you crossed him with Drake, you mixed Booker with Drake.
No, look, this was the actual image that they sent out with actually 2 more fingers up with this 88, and our graphics department decided to go this route. If it offends you, I apologize. Go find another Suns show. For those of you listening on the podcast, Devin Booker was given an 88 rating on NBA 2K21. They put out a graphic with him holding up 3 fingers on both hands, and our graphics department just read between the lines. If you get what I'm saying,
give the graphics department a raise. They deserve extra work. I appreciate their efforts.
I just think, and we won't spend too much time here because it's a video game.
Good.
And in the end,
good.
Who gives
right?
Who gives a crap, right? But come on, man. The guy proved in the bubble on a national stage how damn good he is. He won the NBA 2K championship in their little tournament. What does he have to do to get some respect? I know the answer could be make the playoffs. Well, that's a team thing. These are individual ratings. We're just making up a number for how good a guy is. And Devin Booker is better than 88. He deserves at least a 90.
The outrage on this is just so ridiculous, though. Like, this is like being like, having a debate over who would win a one-on-one game between Michael Jordan in his prime and LeBron James in his prime. Like it's never like it's just it's a meaningless debate. And the other part of it is, do you see the other players that are ranked 88? Like, did you go through the rankings, Espo, other than just seeing that he is ranked 88? Like, I'm looking at the list right now. Klay Thompson is an 89. Donovan Mitchell's 88. Trae Young 88. Chris Paul 88. Paul George 88. Russell Westbrook 88. Siakam 88. Bradley Beal 88. It's
Give us
not
some.
like,
what are some of the 90s and pluses?
Well,
okay, so 90 is Kyrie Irving. 90 is Karl Anthony Towns. Nikola Jokic has 90. Jason Tatum 90. Joel Embiid 91. Like,
so you're saying it's about a pretty good rating, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, if you really want to get into the respect category here, I'd say the fact that he's listed amongst the players as an 88 ranking is pretty damn good. And it's pretty amazing that he has reached the point where he's in the same conversation as some of these guys. That's what we've been wanting, isn't it? So I think we throw the number.
Shut up, Jared. Do not bring logic into this conversation.
No, Jared!
We're gonna talk video game rankings.
Dunking all over Espo.
I'm gonna tell you why this is a dumb argument, just both from the fact that he was ranked probably where he should be, and why are we even talking about video game rankings? So
what you need is a little stuffed Espo doll and dunk him in the basket behind you.
There's my phone.
Yeah. You know what? You're not welcome back. I'm muting Jared for the remainder of the episode.
It's been awesome to be part of the solar panel. I appreciate you guys having me.
Let's be
lifelong fan.
Let's be honest. It doesn't matter. It's just a fun thing, and I really just wanted an excuse to put the graphics department to work. So
they deserve a raise, like I said.
So let's talk Amar'e. I was just going to say that Amari's on Nash's staff, but I know how the Flaming Ballers are in the chat, so we won't say that. He's become a member of the coaching staff of the Brooklyn Nets. I'm so glad the Phoenix Suns have Monty Williams in this coaching staff and that they proved themselves last year, because I could not have taken an off season of Suns fans complaining, why don't we have Nash and Amar'e as our coaching staff? Yeah,
we still got a little bit of that on Twitter.
Well, if you think that the Suns should have fired Monty Williams and hired Steve Nash and Amar'e Stoudemire, I got some waterfront property in Yuma I want to sell you, because you can see the ocean from there. Is what
Jared,
I'm trying to tell you.
That sounds very nice.
Well, look, this. I'm selling it for millions. So Jared, if you want
Bender Island.
Bender Island is out in Yuma. Yes,
we've been looking to get the kids out of the house all COVID. Maybe didn't know you had that lovely place in Yuma. I wish I did.
So what do you guys make? And Jared, we could start with you. What do you guys make of Amar'e becoming a member of the coaching staff in Brooklyn? And do you think Steve Nash is set up for success out there?
I think he is set up for success purely by the roster that he has inherited as the new head coach. And I think it's going to be fun. He's a genius on the basketball court, but you never know. It's one thing that you can see. It's one thing that you can facilitate when you're on the court. We've seen time and time again that, former players who are great on the court can't necessarily translate it to coaching. But I'm excited for him. I think adding Amar'e is just a lot of fun. I think it's fun that it's from just a storyline standpoint, the two of them together, coaching together, maybe running, screen and roll practices and things like that as a unit could be a lot of fun and is a cool storyline. And I can see Amar'e becoming like a Mark Bryant has been to a DeAndre Ayton for the Nets. Mark Bryant's been huge for the Suns, and has been a catalyst for the low post game and trying to grow DeAndre Ayton's game. And, maybe Amar'e can really find a niche there, becoming an assistant coach for big men and how to play the new age game that the Suns basically kind of were at the forefront of back a decade ago. So I think this is a lot of fun for people that think that the Suns missed out here. Come on, like don't even go down that road. But as a Suns fan, I think it's neat to see them reunited, and I hope they don't do well, because I'm not a big Nets guy. I'm not a big Kyrie fan, but I think any Suns fan wishes nothing but the best for both of them, and hopefully they have some success and can make this more than just a one hit thing or a big name thing, and actually be a respectable coaching unit.
I do wish nothing but the best for both of them. Absolutely. I worry about their potential for success. I don't know that they've been set up for success. Sure, they're going to win games. Yes, the Brooklyn Nets are going to win games. They're going to win 50 games or whatever it is next year, assuming a little bit of health, maybe 55. Great. But as far as success for Steve Nash as a head coach, when your two best players were already in a post-hiring Nash interview saying, we're all kind of the head coach. I mean, I'm a head coach sometimes. Kyrie Irving talking. KD's a head coach sometimes. We all contribute to head coaching. And then KD is there going, yep, I agree. We all contribute to it. Well, that kind of means if you have a lot of head coaches, you have no head coach. So I think it's going to be tough for Steve to actually succeed as a head coach. Although he might win some games, we know coaches still lose their jobs and all that if they don't work out perfectly with their roster. Now, it's possible Steve is a everyman that will be okay with his players wanting to be the head coach sometimes. But I just don't know if he's set up for success. And frankly, I love Amar'e, but coaching was about the last thing I ever expected from Amar'e. And I don't know that he's a thinking man's guy as far as strategy and all that. He was more of just execute my crazy athleticism, and Nash was really the brains behind it. And maybe that'll be the true on the coaching staff. But, Nash, you don't really need that. You don't need the Amar'e to be your finisher. Maybe, okay, are you going to pick and roll him into a coaching meeting? So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go. I wish nothing but the best. Amar'e's going to introduce pouring wine into the tub coolers, for post games. They're all going to be soaking in wine after they win their first round playoff series. Maybe, I don't know, but that would be fun to watch. I'm curious to see what Amar'e's real contributions are. I want nothing but the best for him. I just never thought of him as a coach. So I hope I hope he proves me wrong. I really do.
Yeah, I was in the same boat when I heard yesterday. I thought Shams got the report wrong. I was like, Amar'e as an assistant coach. Like, I thought did he mean they signed him to the back end of the roster because everybody knows
was the most likely thing. Yeah. I thought so too.
Because that was last year. He was pushing to try to make it an NBA comeback. The other report was that Dirk turned down Steve Nash for a spot on the coaching staff, saying Dallas is the only place he'd do that. So to me, is Steve just going through the teammates he used to like and going, look, I got a ride here. You want to cash in on this with me?
I know KD and Kyrie are probably going to walk all over me, so I better have some friends with me to tell my coaching staff to make sure it's an enjoyable experience.
I think the next move there is Mike D'Antoni becomes their lead assistant, because I think the head coaching market has dried up for him this offseason. I think he'll go.
That would be excellent
and help Steve. But to Dave's point, what the heck is Amar'e going to teach? Like, are they going to have sessions on how to insert an unnecessary quote or an unnecessary quotation mark in your first name?
Apostrophe.
Like what apostrophe? Thank you is what I meant. Like,
I knew where you were going with that.
Like, is that really what we're? Thank you, I appreciate it, Dave. An extra apostrophe in your first name, like you don't teach athleticism, and that's what Amar'e made his career on. So
maybe they're trying to tap it. Maybe they're trying to tap in into that international player pool a little bit and want to use his insight on who could be good out there. But then again, do you trust Amar'e as a scout or trust his insights there? So maybe I'm with you guys.
Maybe they're just reaching out to the Jewish population in Brooklyn. Maybe that's part of the reason they're signing.
Oh wow!
Whoa. What?
Oh wow!
That's not a knock. That's just Amar'e's Jewish. He spent time in Israel.
Do you think the Jewish population would gravitate to Amar'e? They feel so much like him. They see themselves in him.
let's move to a segment that is a special segment because of our guest here. It is the Nick Cage spectrum. For those of you not familiar with the Nick Cage
The
spectrum,
graphics team is just on point today.
Yeah, look at
I
yeah,
see you
Nick
gave the
Cage
graphics
spectrum.
team a 20% raise.
Nick
Gosh.
Cage spectrum. So anyways, the Nick Cage spectrum is an old bit that Jared and I used to do on a couple podcasts that we have done in the past, where we pick a Nick Cage film that best represents a topic we're talking about. The topic today is the Suns off season. Jared, where does the Suns off season fall in the Nick Cage spectrum?
Okay, so I could go a lot of routes with this one, right? Because from zero to the worst of Nick Cage or the best of Nick Cage, there's a lot of directions we can go based on who the Suns could go after and how they could approach it. I went a kind of a different route though. So I took the Family Man. Okay, the Family Man. Have we seen the Family Man, Dave? I know you're a huge Nick Cage fan too. Have you seen the movie The Family Man?
You know what? Face Off is one of my favorite movies. So
Face Off is a great movie, but the Suns don't deserve Face Off.
The premise of Face Off is incredible. How they completely changed the body of each guy too when they changed his face was remarkable.
It's pretty amazing. So I went with the Family Man, and here's why. So the premise of that movie is you have Nick Cage, who's this hot shot Wall Street, big time, super selfish, drives nice cars, has an incredible penthouse, and does nothing but live for himself and is kind of a jerk. And then he meets someone in I think it's like a drugstore or something like that to get some alcohol or whatever. And the next morning he wakes up and it's a snapshot, kind of like a glimpse of if he ended up going and marrying the woman that was his first love, and has a daughter, has 2 kids actually, and it kind of shows him what life would have been like if he had a family, and he learns a lot about himself, and he becomes more in tune with what's important, and so on and so forth. So my comparison here is the Suns have had a bunch of just trash, horrible, just ridiculous years that have just not worked out well for them as an organization and for us as fans. The bubble was almost that snapshot of what it could look like and what success could be like as a result of going a different route or handling things a certain way or identifying players a certain way. And it could mean that we then in turn go and find your girlfriend from being selfish and about yourself, and maybe sitting down and having a discussion, not necessarily getting back to dating, not necessarily becoming married and having the kids that you saw in that glimpse, but just sitting down and having a conversation of, you know what, I made a mistake back then, but now I've seen what it looks like to go about it the right way. And maybe we really need to sit down and take a look at this and make sure we handle it so that we're going in the right direction. So my Nick Cage spectrum is a Family Man, and hopefully the Suns see the bubble as that glimpse of going about it the way that this team should going forward.
Look, Jared, I always love when you put this much thought into your Nick Cage spectrum. The dumbest segment that anybody has ever done on a podcast.
Because here's the thing, and to bring Dave into this though, because like the reason why we came up with the Nick Cage spectrum way back when, Dave, was because we were so sick of mainstream media breaking down games in a way that just people either was completely obvious to everyone or made no sense because they went down this rabbit hole of ridiculous analytics or were focusing on such small parts of games to paint this big picture. And Espo were like, you know what, we need to find a better way to describe this stuff, a better way to go about it, a better way to present it, and maybe a more entertaining way to go about it. And Espo throws out Nicolas Cage movies, and I'm like, sold. And to be honest, it's become my favorite way. Even when we're not doing podcasts together, I will watch Cardinals games and be like, how can I compare this to a Nick Cage movie? like because that would be the true barometer of how I feel about it. So that's the origin of it. So that's why I put so much thought into it, Espo, because for me personally, it's the best gauge to actually describe a sporting event.
We could have called it the Nick Gage. We didn't. Oh man, we missed an opportunity.
Nick Gage. Oh my God.
Look, Per
All
usual.
time, you guys just came up with a better title.
Per usual.
Actually, I like Nick Cage Spectrum. I like that one better. Actually.
But by the way, Jared, per usual, I have not put as much thought as you into it. But that's fine because you're here for the quality Nick Cage analysis, and I'm here to just make dumb jokes. So in that vein, I'm going with Raising Arizona as my choice, a movie about a robber who marries a policewoman. They both want kids. They find out they're infertile, and Nick Cage, who happens to be named H.I. McDonough in this movie, has to then go steal, basically kidnap a child for them. It's actually a comedy too, so keep that in mind. That's an interesting premise for a comedy. But basically, I feel like the Suns are going to have to find a way to steal a young guy that fits this roster that helps make them better this offseason. And they're going to have to do it in a way that overcomes their own McDonough issues, right? So they're going to have to figure out a way to make this team better and not make the missteps that they've had in the past. Prove that Phoenix isn't infertile when it comes to making the playoffs, that they can burr the playoff, a playoff run here in the Valley. So
raise Arizona.
And raise Arizona.
Did that actually have a happy ending, that movie?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But that actually fits the Suns too. We've all been in our own personal prison when it comes to the Phoenix Suns over the last decade and not making it to the playoffs. So you know what? That means it's time for one.
Wait! Do I not get to participate?
You said you didn't want.
You said you didn't want.
I did.
Would love for
then
Dave
you guys
King
got
to
me
participate.
all fired up over Nick Cage movies. There've been so many, and actually, the dude is just look. He's crazy as a loon, but he is in a lot of movies, and so I've been running movies through my head during this segment. And one of my favorite memories of Nick Cage is leaving Las Vegas, just because he put on an Elvis Presley outfit and parachuted back into Vegas to save his girlfriend, Sarah Jessica Parker. And then there was also the where he was the treasure hunter. And he had the group of nerds, and they solved they found these national treasure. I think that's the name of the movies.
Dave, the premise of this
those
segment
applies.
By the way, Dave, the segment isn't about just recalling Nick Cage movies you remember.
Con Air, though, I'm going to go with Con Air because he kicked ass to totally take over everything and win in the end. So I'm going with Con Air.
Con Air was the one I used last time we did with Nick
Cage
Spectrum together. It's a popular one for the Spectrum, that's for sure.
I love that Dave made my thought process look immensely deep in this. Time for
I'm only here to help.
Oh, and we appreciate that, Dave. Time for Espo's Big Board. That's right, Espo's Big Board this week. Graphics department getting more money on this one because with Borat 2 coming out yesterday on Amazon Prime, I decided it's time to do the 5 best foreign Suns players that are my favorite. It's Espo's Big Board time. Let's hop into it, and let's see if I actually remember who I put number 5. Oh, that's right.
The graphics team is part of this.
All right, it kind of. I let the photos of these gentlemen speak for themselves. The first one, Georgy Glushkov. Most of you may not remember him, but he was from Glushkov, excuse me, from the 80s. He was one of the first players from the Eastern European bloc to ever sign in the NBA. And the legend goes that he fell in love with McDonald's so much that he ate himself out of the league, basically, in the first year. And if there's anybody that Espo can get behind, it's a guy that ate himself out of the league with McDonald's. Let's be honest.
The guy
he was Oliver Miller.
That's the guy they should have used for the Super Size Me documentary. Then that would have been a better play.
Oh man.
Oh, so yeah, Georgy Glushkov, however you want to say it, Dave, is my vote. We've got an honorable mention at number 5 as well. It's Bender Island. Of course, Dragon's got to make the list. I couldn't justify putting him any higher than 5, though. As much as we love him here on the solar panel, Dragon isn't going to make it higher than number 5 on this list. I'm sorry, Dragon. I love you, but
you've still got that property
I do. I own it and I'll own it forever, but you're not making it higher than 5 because this guy, number 4 on my list, Marcin Gortat, one of my
Yeah.
favorite players ever to
Yeah.
come through Phoenix.
I'm surprised he's not number 1 from you. I thought he was going to be number 1 for sure.
Number 1 is special and near and dear to my heart. Yeah, you'll appreciate it when you see who number 1 is. But Marcin Gortat, the man who coined brothel on 2 wheels, the man who once told me that he, in a profanity laden tirade, that he was a better player than Dwight Howard, and nobody ever recognized it. One of my favorites of all time to interact with, to interview. Marcin Gortat is number 4 on the list. Number 3, not going to be a surprise to anybody who's listening to this show, Goran Dragic. That's right.
Oh, man.
Thank you for saying his name right, by the way.
What?
Yo, so few people say his name right. I really appreciate you saying his name right.
Goran Dragic is high on my list. Another person. As much as I loved him as a basketball player, he is a better human being. One of the only players who ever would ask me how my family was doing, knew my wife's name, would have genuine human conversations. He'd go out of his way if I was down on level 0 where the locker room was, and come over and say hi to me, even if I didn't see him. I'll forever love Goran Dragic when it comes to that.
I'll never forget the day. I'll never forget the day of that drama with McDonough, the interview scrum. I was down there for that back in. I think you guys are down there too. I will never forget the look on his face.
I don't trust him.
Yeah. It was like a hostage video. Like it was so uncomfortable. Like he was being forced.
You know, to this day, I'm still amazed that the Suns made him available for that, because you know how the Suns are so close to the vest on setting themselves up to look bad in any capacity. I am shocked to this day that they allowed him to do an interview during that.
Remember, it was in the hallway though. It wasn't even like in an open, well-lit area. It was in that hallway outside of the practice court, and it was super dark. And I was a camera guy, so the lighting was terrible, and it was dark and ominous.
I still remember being in the locker room. Yeah, the end of the game right before the All-Star break. The Suns they had a winning record. We're still 28-25, I think, going into the All-Star break. I could be slightly off, but I think it was that. They had lost a few going into the break, and so Goran was really frustrated. Obviously, Goran was frustrated that entire season because he'd been relegated to small forward in that lineup with IT and Bled. And I still remember Goran doing his interview in his corner of the locker room, his far left corner of the locker room, and then all the Keefe boys, the Mo boys, Morris brothers, and Eric Bledsoe and Archie Goodwin, that was like quite the foursome at the other end of the locker room, and they were cracking, joking it up, laughing and getting, just joking totally about something. And Goran was the one who was pissed off for having just lost the game, right, going into the All-Star break. And I remember him in the middle of listening to a question, he just kind of turned his head. And he just kind of looked at those guys cracking up down the hallway. And then he just turned back, and then he answered his question. And 3 days later, or 5 days later, he demanded a trade.
Wow. Yep. But always, no matter where he plays, no matter how he plays, always one of my favorites. So number 2 on the list, and I think this is going to surprise people that this man is number 2. It's Steve Nash is number 2 on my big board of foreign players to play for the Phoenix Suns. Yes, Steve Nash, Captain Canada, born in South Africa, makes the list at number 2 two-time.
You have to speak a different language to be really considered foreign. I mean, we can all speak Canadian. Come on.
I'm counting him because he deserves to be on
Canadian.
The list.
I didn't know that.
Hey, you hoser. See, I can speak Canadian. I just offended an entire country with one comment, but I'm on a roll today in offending other countries. But number 1 on the big board, and if you have followed me ever, you will know who this is going to be. Number 1 on my top 5 foreign Suns players. It's Marco Milic, as I forget to change the image, and it's still
Yeah,
Steve
what the
Nash
hell?
on the
He is
image.
not Marco Milic.
Marco Milic. There
You
go.
go.
The man who once jumped over a green, a
Before
Honda
Blake
del
Griffin did it.
Sol.
Yes.
Yes, back in 1997. And the reason I love this man is he's the first video I remember seeing on an NBA.com. The Suns signed him, and we got a postage stamp size, and for kids, we used to use those to send mail, the thing that comes in that box outside your house. But a postage stamp size video that was as grainy as hell. Like, you know, when you send a video from an iPhone to an Android phone and it compresses it and it looks really crappy. Imagine that being 100 times worse. And it was a little video of Marco Milic jumping over that Honda del Sol and dunking. And I fell in love with the guy from that point. My eternal quest to find an authentic Marco Milic jersey continues, but he's number one on the list.
How's the Tom Tupa search going?
I actually am going to have a Tom Tupa jersey in my collection in the very, very near future. So that is Espo's big board that was inspired by Oubre Jr coming out. So that is Espo's big board for this week. Thank you for
when you got me excited for number one. I thought it was going to be Yuta Tabusi for a second there.
I know there's so many.
I had a
so
feeling.
many foreign players.
Zarko Chabarkova.
Come on.
The only NBA player has ever been Espo's height that played for the Suns. Yuta Tabusi.
That's not true. I was taller than Isaiah Thomas, so I guess.
Yes, true.
That's a good poll. That's a good poll right there.
Yes, so
good point.
So shut up, Dave. So let's get into. We're gonna do only 2 questions from the Flaming Ballers bag this week because we have run way over. Because my ability to rein all this in obviously is not as good as former people who used to be the ringleader of this brothel on wheels. So we're going to head into, and I had this all queued up, and then I must have hit something during the Flaming Ballers or during the
you must have hit
the Espo's big board.
But well, you wanted to use your thumbs, and you made it so that you use your thumbs, and your phone tab went away.
So Cody Hunt wants to know, what are your expectations going into next season? Will it be a huge disappointment if the Suns don't make the playoffs? Jared, why don't you take the lead here?
Yes, playoffs are bust for me, and whether that's realistic or not, I don't know. We'll see as what comes of the draft and free agency. But regardless of what they do this offseason and in the draft and in free agency and whatever trades they make, regardless of what they do as it stands right now, it is playoffs or bust for me. They have to make that jump. And seeing how much Jamal Murray, Damian Lillard, and some of these other guys really just showed out in the playoffs and the bubble, and how their stardom took a next step. And even Donovan Mitchell, once again, we really need that for Devin Booker. I want that for Devin Booker. He showed a glimpse that he's capable of doing that in the bubble in those 8 games and get some traction from a publicity and national love standpoint. They need to take that next step as an organization. So it is absolutely playoffs or bust.
We spent 4 years dealing with people saying, can Devin Booker really produce for a team that plays well? Can Devin Booker really produce in meaningful games? We had important national analysts saying that Devin Booker might just actually need to scale it back and become a contributor on a good team rather than a leader on a good team. And what does he do? He leads the most meaningful games he ever got were for the Suns in this bubble, and he dominated. And he was first team all bubble, and he probably, if it weren't for Damian Lillard, he would have been MVP of the bubble, the pre-playoffs bubble. And yes, the entire playoffs, as Jared says, I was just sitting there just shaking my head, just going, Booker should be here. Booker should be here. There should be no more times that Booker is not in the playoffs. He's already 5 years into his career. You can't spend your entire career on the outside looking into this bubble of this playoffs. So the Suns have to get him in the playoffs. That's why I'm saying keep Kelly Oubre, keep your best players, add new players. Don't subtract and don't push down the road. All these chips need to be in within reason. Obviously, you don't mortgage the entire future, but you don't have to. Keeping Kelly Oubre is not mortgaging the future. Put the best players, group of players around Devin Booker, and then just win some freaking games.
I with the play-in tournament that's sounding like it's here to stay. I think it's the Suns finishing in the 8th seed in the regular season will be, I will feel all right with that. If something fluky happens in some play-in tournament and they don't quite make the playoffs, at least finishing 8th in the West will feel like an accomplishment to me. Playoffs or bust is pretty close, but if they finish 8th in a tough Western Conference and then something fluky happens in a playoff tournament situation, fine. I'm okay with that. But you need to show that you are one of the top 8 teams in the West, that you've made improvement, that you are above 500. Like that's a watershed mark for this team too, because as well as they played, even with the 8-0 mark in the bubble, they were still under 500 when this whole thing wrapped up for them. So finishing over 500, being in the top 8 in the West, whether or not they have some fluky thing happen in the bubble is the most important thing to me. I need to see that to understand that this team is moving in the right direction. If that does not happen, there's a problem here. You need to take that next step. That this past season was all about stepping up to prove that you weren't a bottom feeder. This next season is stepping up to prove that you were a true contender and that the bubble wasn't a fluke. So that's where I stand. Last question here as we wrap it up on the Sun solar panel, as we reach deep into the Flaming Ballers sack, assuming from Andrew, assuming the only major change we make is acquiring a backup guard with the mid-level exception and signing Wood, which these are a lot of assumptions here. These are huge assumptions. These aren't small assumptions.
Assuming.
But assuming the offseason goes perfect and they get a backup guard that they need and Christian Wood at a reasonable salary, how good would the Suns be if Wood maintains the same production from last season? Another big give. Stretch hard and tell me what you guys think here, Dave. You could start.
Oh, man. Okay. So if everything goes perfectly and they play as well as you expected them to play, I would say the Suns could win 50 games for sure. It's going to be tough to get really high up in the West. But, I always say good teams win games. Good paper doesn't. So they got to be good on the court. And if if you're good on the court, you can win any games you're in. You're competitive in all the games. So I would definitely say 50 wins that way. Maybe, going 55, they're a little young for that, but 50 wins, I think, is definitely doable.
They should have been an Office episode about good teams win games, good paper doesn't. Dunder Mifflin, I think, would be very offended by that comment. That the Office missed an opportunity there.
I was going to say the same thing. He pulled a reverse Michael Scott there. So, Jared, what do you think the ceiling would be for that team? What would you expect?
It's so hard to predict. If everything goes perfectly, I tend to agree, not to make it for a lame podcast, but that 4-5 realm, I think, could be their ceiling if everything goes flawlessly. Maybe better, I don't know. But I think a lot of things have to go into their favor. I completely agree with Dave that that's probably the realm that we're probably looking at. And I hope it's the case. But right now, I just want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, 45 to 50 wins. I think there's going to be growing pains where you have to get Wood and Ayton early on to figure out how to play together. There'd be some things to figure out, but I think 45 to 50 is where you would see that roster top out, depending on what the backup guard is too. That's a big question mark in there. By the way, Blaze Megatron in the chat, one of the Flaming Ballers, said Hamed Haddadi should have been number 1. Who's your Haddadi should have made the list? I agree. That was a giant miss, literally and figuratively,
swinging
on my part on the Espo big board. I can't make everybody happy. Let's be honest. So, Jared,
what would be the perfect off season though? Let me just throw it in. The perfect off season made me think of it when you mentioned Hamed. Is the Suns need to sign Boban to be the backup center to DeAndre Ayton. God, the locker room would be hilarious. The whole team would have much more fun.
And DeAndre just struggles with him. If you can't beat him, bring him on board.
Join him, exactly. Yes,
bring
in the Boban. Yeah. And then he would make the top of our list.
Jared, thank you so much for being the guy that answered our text messages this week and filling in on the program. We usually text 7 to 8 people. You were the one that responded. No, thank you for joining us. Tell the people where they can find you on the socials.
You can follow me at Jared Cohen _ on Twitter. I used to have a lot more to bring to the table there back when I was in my past life a member of the media, but now I just like to engage with people, talk Suns basketball, talk Cardinals, trying not to jump off a ledge with U of A basketball, getting a notice of allegations. So I'm always here to talk sports. So if you could find me on there, that'd be probably the best way to track me down.
That is Jared Cohen. You find Dave King at Dave King NBA. No, he's not actually employed by the NBA. He just tries to enhance his importance by including those 3 letters. You can find
good for
me
search metrics. You know that as anyone. Espo, if he has NBA in the handle, it helps with the search optimization.
You can find me at Espo. You can find the Suns. Find the show at Sun Solar Panel. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, join and become a Flaming Baller. You can also hit up sunsshirts.com. Pick yourself up a nice Suns shirt and support the show. So for Jared, for Dave King, I'm Greg Esposito. Ahoy, hoy. We'll talk to you next time here on the Sun Solar Panel.